Welcome to Finite Card Discussion, the sixth video in Yu-Gi-Oh! Discussion Week. We're discussing Finite Cards. Finite Cards? Wait, that sounds familiar. And there's a card that looks just like this. Like Infinite Cards. Could this be the opposite? Well, pretty much it is. You can't really read it right here because it's all Japanese text. I can tell you, Infinite Cards makes it to have no limits as opposed to the regular 6. Finite Cards makes it that so that you have a 3-card hand size limit. That is few. Sure, sometimes decks will have 3 cards, sometimes you'll maybe go up to 5. Especially decks that have a lot of cards in their hand, like combo pieces, that don't really like this. What decks could make use of Finite Cards? Well, let's first take a look at what decks do not like Finite Cards, aka what you could use this card against, because this is more of an anti-something card, because it could also be negative for yourself. I don't really see it as a positive. Finite Cards, 3 size hand limit. Which deck wants more than 3 cards? A certain deck that needs 5 cards in your hand. Exodia. Sure, yeah, if it's an Exodia OTK, like you only have to discover the hand size limit at the end of the end phase, so if you can just combo before that, it's done. But, let's say you have 2 Exodia pieces and then 3 other cards in your hand, but Finite Cards is active at the end phase, then you have to discard stuff. Either you discard your Exodia pieces and your Exodia chances are done, or you discard cards you could maybe combo with the next turn or the turn after, making it even more difficult to get Exodia after that. So this could be used against Exodia if they're unable to get Exodia first turn. Other decks that don't like this, what are other decks that would have a lot of cards at the end phase? Not really Chainburn, they set a lot of other things. And then they draw maybe during the opponent's turn if they have a combo of Jar of Greed, Accumulated Fortune, Reckless, things like that. Sometimes during their own turn as well, but then they just set stuff again to not listen. Although, I suppose against Chainburn, it could sometimes work, because sometimes when I play Chainburn, I do end up with multiple cards that I want to save for later. Or, like, cards that I just can't set, because I've drawn so many. So that, I suppose, could work. Now there's some decks that don't really mind it. Maybe they'd have to discard once or twice, but that's about it. Like if you have Dandelion in your deck, you can play, like you can discard it for Finite Cards, and then it'd still trigger and activate its effect, summon 2 tokens. What other decks would really not mind it? Infernities. Infernities generally play with an empty hand anyway. Maybe they have 1 card, but then you discard it for whatever effect. I don't really remember exactly how all the effects work in Infernities. But like Infernity Archfiend, it could be the only card in your hand. Then you play it, then you have an empty hand again. It'll just be like your opening hand in Infernities that'll have more than 3. But otherwise, after that, generally, you'll always have like no cards in your hand for most of the thing, or then maybe 1 or 2 in Infernities. Not more than 3. So 3, 4, 5 plus, like 3 plus, you won't really hit that in Infernities. If like the least you can get your combos off well. If like your first card is immediately interrupted, then maybe. But otherwise, no. What other decks would not mind it? What other decks play with empty hand? Infernities are known to play with that. I'm not really sure. Let's see if the tips can help us with anything. Like Wizard of Dark Sage, like I want to look at this like the Combi Search by right now because it's a spell, like a continuous spell as opposed to a monster. So when I Dark Sage, add a spell from deck thing. Yeah, Dark Sage would be there for all spells. There's something, and a lot of mons have that as well. Like search for a spell card or a continuous spell card. Set 1 spell card directly from your deck. Yeah, this thing will also be mentioned in this part for everything. That's why I generally don't really look at them for them. Magician must be a spell. Demon Emperor Angmar, I don't remember what that is. Oh yeah, there's one of the new cards. Again, just spell card. I'm not even gonna look at the rest. Can we use a side deck card against Exodia? Certainly. During your opponent's end phase, use cards like the Gift of Greed. Make your opponent draw them, force them to discard. Let's say they have 3 cards, then you give them 2, but then they discard, so then they'll still have 3, and then they can just choose which ones to discard. Choose to discard what they don't like, or that they like the least. If it's all cards they like, then they won't like the fact that they enter the graveyard, especially if they need them in either the hand or the deck. Um, if they have, let's say, two cards, and you only force them to discard one, and you give them one extra free card, and then it's more free card after that. So I'm not really sure if I agree with this. Like, the gift of greed with Finite Cards will be that great. Unless you know that the opponent hates it when any of their cards go to the grave, then I suppose, yeah. This card can make Dark World Grimoire more effective. Let's see. During your end phase, if you discard a monster or monsters to the graveyard because you had more cards in your hand size than your hand size limit, you control one of these monsters someday. Yeah, that could definitely work. Just have one copy, maybe two copies. No, one copy of this in a deck that runs a few finite cards or something. And then like it could be a deck with like some high level monsters or slightly difficult to summon monsters, but that like aren't semi-nomi or nomi that need to be summoned via their own effect, or summoned by their own effect first, because otherwise Grimoire can't do it. But Dark World Grimoire with Finite Cards is a combo that I could see being used. I don't think it's that strong, but it's definitely a possibility, and I like the way they could work together and help each other. And effective in any deck that requires small or no hand. Fable, do they require small? Not necessarily, I think. Because Fable, especially if you play with Unicore, you want an equal hand to your opponent. So if you run Finite Cards, I suppose that'll sort of make your opponent go for 3 or less. But if you play just a specific Unicore deck, then you have like Legacy of Yata-Garasu, Reckless Greed, maybe Magic Drain, things to alter hand sizes of both you and your opponent to make sure Unicorn negates pretty much everything. So then Finite Cards, I don't think it'll help that much, but if a Fable player can think of something in Fables that would make this card very useful, let me know. It's been quite some time since I last played Fables, so I don't really remember how much hand size they would normally have in a regular game, and that's in a regular Fable deck, not one that's specifically focused on Unicore. I don't really remember. Okay, this was the discussion video for Finite Cards. Let me know what you think of the card. It's released in Shining Victories, which just released a few days ago in the OCG. We'll have to wait a few months for it to become TCG. But are there any decks that you would like, well, that you think you'll want to use it in? Or not necessarily that, but that it can be used in? Can you think of certain combos or good plays that involve this card? Let me know in the comments, and then I will see you in the Yu-Gi-Oh video tomorrow. Goodbye.